You're listening to The Journey podcast. The Journey is a ministry of Southcrest Baptist Church for those in college or college-aged. We hope this podcast helps you find your greatest pleasure and purpose in Jesus.
Welcome to The Journey podcast. We're back. I'm so glad that you're taking the time to listen today. How are you doing, Tyler?
Doing well. Yeah, man, as good as could be expected. I don't know what that means, but doing as good as.
That's good. Yeah, me too.
You know,
Me too. I think.
I feel like did this just get lower? I don't know. Did it? Did you see it low?
It does feel like it's a little lower. Mine was doing that too.
Yeah, man, I'm doing well. There we go.
New series.
New series.
Yeah.
Yep. We started a new series at T&G, Journey to the Cross.
Yep.
Really excited about this one. I think part of music, I love to like really take seasons and like kind of be intentional with them. So whether it's like Advent or Lent or summer and wear like really bright clothes. That sounds stupid. But it is what it is. Okay. It's not very spiritual, but yeah, I love to take like seasons and just be intentional with them. And so I think with this one, sorry, Marie, I'm excited for this one because we get to like really slow down and contemplate Easter for the next 6 weeks.
Yes, that's 6 weeks. The series is it's 7 weeks until Easter. But we've got spring break.
Yeah, we have spring break.
Yeah.
And so this will lead us like right up to the week, like Holy Week.
Nice.
Yeah.
And we're
Did you do the ashes today?
I haven't done any ashes. I was going to ask you the same question.
You
put any ashes on your face?
Not on my face.
Mm-hmm.
No, I didn't do any ashes.
No. Do you do Lent? Anything for Lent? Traditions other than wearing bright clothing?
Yep. Not outside of like I mean like I don't get into it from the standpoint of like, okay, here's what I'm giving up like for 40 days.
Mm-hmm.
I think I just become more I try to just be more intentional with like my scripture reading and like really focus in on like kind of like what we're doing at T&G, really focus in on that final week of the life of Jesus. How can I be more intentional with that? I think it's great if people give you are giving up biscuits and gravy.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So for Lent, starting tonight.
Yeah. No biscuit love for us.
No biscuit love. Yeah. It sounds like a song.
Oh, it should be.
Biscuit
if it
love.
Isn't already.
I'm sure it is.
Let's write it. Let's write it right now.
CeeLo Green.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do y'all know CeeLo Green? What?
Oh.
You know what? Here's what's frustrating. I told you this. I had to like infuse a little bit of culture into the residents this week because
what did you tell me?
They had never heard of Dave Matthews Band.
Oh, my goodness.
And I was like, guys, Dave Matthews Band. And they were like, who's that? And I was like, okay, we're going to listen to Crash Into Me. We're going to listen to Ants Marching.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to listen to all these songs. So, yeah.
You don't know Dave Matthews Band?
Oh my.
This is rough. This is rough, y'all.
Yeah.
No? Okay.
Oh,
I thought you were shaking your head no too, Andrew. I was like, what?
I was like the sound guy, the person who mixes music and sound doesn't know Dave Matthews Band.
He does though.
Yeah, we're not going to shame him, but we will shame you.
Yeah, that's right.
And I'm talking to the camera, not to the girls behind the camera.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. We're doing a Good Friday service.
We are doing a Good Friday service. Yeah, I'm excited about that.
Yeah, honestly, I think it's gonna. That's gonna be so cool to have done this journey to the cross. Like honestly, if you're not in the journey, you're missing out. You know, because like you're gonna get this whole journey to the cross series, and then I hope y'all are already planning to come to the Good Friday service on the 18th. That's what it is, right?
Yes.
Friday. It's Friday. Good Friday's on Friday. And it's the Friday before Easter. And then of course Easter's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
Here at Southcrest. I'm so excited about that. But man, yeah, what a
fun time to be alive.
What a fun time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This so like I'll kind of explain this series a little bit. So the Journey to the Cross series kind of explains itself, but the way we're approaching it is each Tuesday night we're taking like a specific day of the week of that final week of Jesus's life. So for instance, like this past Tuesday, we started on Sunday. So like, what did Jesus do the final week of his life on that Sunday, leading up to the cross? Because I think what you find in the Gospels is that final week of his life, like the interesting thing about the Gospels is like it tells the story of Jesus like over a span of essentially 3 years of ministry. But it's not really until the final week of his life that it like zooms in and like gets really detailed about like what he's focused on, what he's doing, what he's saying. And so it spends a lot of time on just that last week, the Gospels do. Because I think not that the other stuff isn't important. It absolutely is. And, but there's just something about that final week that becomes really heavy. It becomes very like, just like, yeah, like weighty. And Jesus, I think, can feel that. And you can feel that as you read through the Gospels in that part. But yeah, so that's what we're doing.
Yeah. I want to really dive in and see if we can dig deeper from last night. But first, we got to talk about Gatsby's.
Yes, Gatsby's. Have you ever heard of it?
Dude, yeah, I totally went to Gatsby's.
Yeah, Gatsby's, man.
I think everyone in the room last night was like, cool.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that. Yeah. But you said that. I was like, what? No way.
Yeah.
I remember Gatsby's?
Yeah.
In that upper story.
In Cactus Alley.
The Cactus Alley, yeah.
Gatsby's awesome. Was a coffee shop. And here's what's interesting. I think we went to Gatsby's. This was Kylie and I's first date. We went to Gatsby's, and that night, I believe, I was going to say it was Kelsey Watts. It wasn't Kelsey Watts. It was, did you ever know a girl named Molly Moore?
Nope. Mm-mm.
Okay. Molly, if you're listening to this, I'm not putting you on blast, okay? Like, I'm not, no, Molly was like amazing. So she led worship at First Baptist at Paradigm.
Oh, okay. I maybe have heard of her.
You probably have heard of like maybe Lainey. There was a girl named Lainey who was kind of like the worship leader.
Okay.
Molly kind of sang alongside her, but Molly's vocal range was like just unreal. And I don't know that we knew she was singing that night at Gatsby's, but we went and it was so loud. It was like our first date, and it was just kind of like, well, this is not great because we can't even talk to each other. So we're just sitting there and there was no seating. So we had to stand. So
there wasn't a lot of seating in there in the first place.
We had to stand with like a saucer in our hands and our coffee on the saucer. So yeah. Do y'all know what a saucer is?
It's like a UFO.
Yeah. It's just a little plate. Okay. Yeah. Let me just, so Gatsby's, but the reason I brought that up was this idea of like unmet expectations, right? Like, are you that type of person? Like, do you like to set expectations for yourself, or do you hate it because you always feel like you're going to be disappointed?
No, I definitely set expectations. Yeah, but feel the disappointment. I think, I hope I'm not mischaracterizing. I think Allie might be the type that's like no expectation because she doesn't want to be disappointed. Yeah. So I totally get that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a real thing. Like, I am like to the extreme, at least with my family, like the expectation setter, and it always sucks.
Maybe you should stop.
Yeah, maybe I should stop expecting anything.
Lower the bar.
Yes. No. my kids, I'm like, yes, they're gonna love this thing we're gonna do. It's gonna be amazing. And then it's just like, cool, Dad, thanks.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's it. And so you leave disappointed.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason I bring that up is because as Jesus gets into, like in Matthew chapter 21, as he comes into Jerusalem, like what should have been, like what were the expectations that the Jews had for the Messiah? Like what should they have been? And is that what they had as Jesus came into, as he came into Jerusalem for the final week of his life? And that's kind of what we looked at.
Yeah. Because they expected like a military general, essentially, right? Like someone to come in and
I think
shop, honestly.
Yes, because you look at the cultural context, right? And under the kind of iron fists of Rome, the oppression, just the fact that like the extreme poverty levels, just the inequality that they felt, how high the taxation rates are. Like, have you ever seen The Chosen? I think The Chosen does a really good job of like showing this side of things, like as Jesus is going about his ministry. And it shows kind of just the weight that they felt from the Roman rulers. And so in their head, like, maybe starting off, they had these expectations of this is what the Messiah should be. But now that they're feeling this for over 100 years, their expectations have shifted. And so Jesus comes in and I think probably disappointed like a lot of people, a lot of Jews, because this is not who we thought the Messiah would be. And I just think that's really interesting.
I mean, I think, tell me if I'm like getting ahead of things here a little bit, but even the disciples, right? Like up to the point of Jesus's death seemed to be still kind of holding on to a little hope that Jesus is gonna conquer the world, but in their picture of conquer the world, like draw his sword and fight back,
Yeah, no, I think that's very accurate. I think for the majority of them, they probably were wrestling with this tension of like, we've seen Jesus work, we've seen the things he does, we've seen the things he said, but also this is what we're still feeling. Like, how do those two things, like work together? Yeah. And so I think there was definitely a tension of, yes, I believe he's the Messiah, but then also, but like I'm still struggling with, the oppression that I'm feeling from the Roman government. And so is this what he should be dealing with? And I think that's what we got into last night is, especially from, and we can talk about whatever, but like, as you get into Matthew 21, like when Jesus gets into Jerusalem, I talked about like for the Jews, if they had these expectations of this is what Jesus should do, he should immediately go to the palace and overthrow Herod and take over the throne and put himself into position. Like if that's what they felt, then what he did when he got into Jerusalem was completely anti that because he doesn't go to the palace. He goes straight to the temple. Yeah. And he goes straight to the Jews and starts really working on the Jews, not the Romans.
Yeah. So Jesus comes riding in on Palm Sunday. Yep. Right. Well, you know what I mean. Yeah. And right, that is such an interesting like part of the week, right? Of the kind of the celebration, the remembrance that we do of Jesus' sacrifice. Is that like it starts with the same people that crucify him at the end of the story. We know, right? Like celebrating him as their king, as he rode in on the donkey. And so at that point, Hosanna right there. They're expecting they're expecting Jesus to, go to the palace, draw his sword and declare victory. Yeah.
Yeah. And what he does is completely opposite of that. And I think what it does is it shows, and I pointed this out, but it shows that he's not he is concerned, but he's not, his first concern is not the external forces that we often like try to blame, right? Like that's what was happening. The Jews were saying, hey, it's Rome. Like they're the issue. They're the problem.
Right.
And like that's been the case for all of time, right? Like I mentioned like Adam in the garden, Eve was the issue for Adam. For Eve, the serpent was the issue for Eve. And I think for like us, I think it's really important for us to identify like what are those quote unquote Romes like in our lives, those external forces that we often like blame for things. Because what Jesus does by going to the temple and dealing with the Jews is he's looking at them saying like, I need to deal with you first. Like the issue is like what's happening inside here in our hearts, not what's happening outside. And that's why I've come all this way. Because if I overthrew Rome, right, and did all of that, but yet never dealt with what's going on in your heart, then something else is just going to rise up, and you're going to find a way to blame that. And so the heart is the biggest issue, and I think that's why Jesus isn't overly concerned with Rome right now. He's more concerned with, the temples in here and the idols that we erect in here. Yeah.
What do you see as some of the most common, like just in the time you've had in ministry, or I guess personally, even like what are expectations of God and of Jesus that not the Jews, right, but just people in our culture seem to commonly have of Jesus and God? Well, like, what are false expectations that we have of him?
Yeah, I think honestly, one of the bigger ones that we tend to fight against is like if I do this, like if I'm quote unquote good and I'm following Jesus and I'm doing these things and I'm serving him, then shouldn't he reward me like with, a better life or an easier path or something like that. Yeah. I think that oftentimes becomes the expectations that people have of Jesus. This is like, I'm doing these things for you. So like there should be some type of reward system that comes from that. Right. And I think that's one of the biggest ones because I don't even know, I don't even think that we often verbalize it that way, but I think we like inherently live that way sometimes. Like, and that reminds me just of the Galatians series we're going through in on Sundays. Like I think back to like, if I'm saved by faith through grace alone, that's awesome. Now I'm going to take it from here and I'm going to like keep it now and do things so that I can keep in God's good graces. Right. And I think for this standpoint, I think oftentimes like the unmet expectations that Jesus would do this for us, if we just do this for Jesus, can lead to bitterness. It can lead to like frustration. Like, why hasn't God blessed me with this? Or like, God, I've lived like I've surrendered to you and I've lived 4 years here in college and like really just pursued you passionately. Why don't I have a girlfriend yet?
Right.
Why don't I have a boyfriend yet? Like, why doesn't someone love me like someone loves my friend? Like, those are the things that I think people really start to fall into, the traps that they can fall into.
Yeah, that our relationship with God is somehow transactional. Like we have something to sell in exchange for in exchange for something positive. Maybe in many cases, salvation. Right? Like I think that's something that I've had this conversation a lot recently with different people, but it is crazy how common it is in our culture, right? In church-grown Southern culture, right? Like how common it is for people to believe. And when you talk to them about when you get a chance to have a a more personal conversation about the gospel and about their walk with Jesus, and how often what you uncover is maybe full on a belief, or at least something that looks like it's getting close to a belief that their works are what bring them hope, right, for eternity. That what gets them to heaven is if they follow the path,
Right.
So common. And that makes me think of something else as you were talking. I've been listening to this Bema podcast, is what it's called. It's been so good. And one of the things, I'm on just like the 4th episode, but one of the things that talked about, that's like going through Genesis right now.
Yeah.
Just like talking about anyways, there's a big rabbit I could chase with on that. But anyways, the point I'm trying to make is they were talking about how in the creation story, so many cool things in Genesis 1, right, that we can notice. But one of the interesting things they were pointing out in this episode of the podcast was that they say it says evening and then morning. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Right. Instead of morning, then evening. Like it constantly is saying evening and then morning the first day or something like that. Right. And there's other things that point to the same point in that story. But they were explaining in the podcast that one of the lessons that's being taught to the ancient Israelites is that they rest first, right? That like rest comes first.
Yeah.
And so the whole point that like you're made in the image of God, you're loved, you're dearly loved by your creator. That's like step one.
Yeah.
Right. And then the day comes and the work comes and all that kind of stuff for sure. But like where you start is with rest.
Yeah.
Rest in Jesus. And gosh, yeah. So that's kind of random. It just made me think of that.
Well,
like,
I think that is kind of like the point, right?
Yeah.
Like
we think works first, right?
Yeah. And I said this past Sunday, but like we need to get to a place where we don't work for acceptance. We work from acceptance.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know that you can do that unless you are like just resting in the fact that you are accepted, right? Like you've got to like actively make that, like you've got to be intentional about that. Like, man, today I'm just pausing and stopping everything that I'm doing, all the good things that I'm trying to pursue. And I'm just going to remind myself that God loves me.
Yeah.
And Jesus went to the cross for me. And I could not be more accepted than I am right now. And then you learn to work from that acceptance, not for that acceptance. And there's a big difference there. How does that time?
I don't know, man. I'm sorry. We
but that's
really,
good. No, I was trying to think but I think it's really good. Yeah.
I don't know, honestly, bro. I have no idea how we got there, but it's honestly a cool place to be.
It is a cool place. It is a cool place to be.
It's so we need to turn it back. We need to turn it back and get back on track. But
here's what I think. I think because we were talking about like those unmet expectations that can kind of fester into bitterness and disappointment.
Oh yeah, I was asking what's a common misconception or expectation?
Yeah,
misplaced expectation of Jesus.
And I think one way that you can battle that, is by just learning to rest in like who God is.
Yeah. It's a big cultural shift for us. It's really, this is not easy. Like it's something we all struggle with because we live in a culture of expectations that you work and then you get a day off, right? You build up your PTO and then you take your PTO, that kind of thing, right? Which it's not saying that our PTO policies are bad. They're great. That's good. Okay. But it's a hard thing to break, to work from acceptance instead of for it. That's big. That's tough.
Yeah. And I think, and part of that, I mean, like we could go into a whole lot of stuff there, but like, I think for some of our students, like they're going to have to wrestle with like, man, some upbringing issues that they had, like because they never felt accepted by their parents or they never felt accepted by friendships. And so like they always felt like they were having to work harder, right, for that acceptance. And so like when you come to Jesus and you find out, oh, you don't have to work for that.
Yeah.
Like he loves you and he accepts you. That can be difficult.
Yeah.
Like that can be hard. That can be a hard, like it's a beautiful reality and one that is so like freeing, but it can be a hard one to like really like sit in and like truly like operate from, because you've never felt that way your entire life. And so I think some of our students will experience that. And so I think that's one of the beautiful things about God is that he's not in a rush, like to try and like get you from point A to point B. He's just kind of going, hey, let me chisel away at a few things at a time, you know? And you're going to get to a place where like you learn to operate from I accept you.
Yeah.
And as you do, those expectations of me, like they'll begin to shift and you'll no longer feel disappointed by me, but actually you'll feel like in just the infinite love that I have for you. And so I think that's a beautiful thing about God.
Yeah. I know we probably need to wrap up, but if you could, right, like I don't regret this conversation at all and where it's went, but what should we leave thinking about here? Like, for the rest of this week, right? As we near our next date in the Journey to the Cross series.
Yep.
What should we be thinking about when we leave this podcast?
Man, I think what I want people to do, is really for the rest of this series, evaluate like, what are the expectations I have of Jesus? Are they real? Like, are they, I think one of the things I ended with last night, are the expectations I have, like, do the expectations that I have, are they formed by culture? Because that's what we see in the life of the Jews when Jesus enters into Jerusalem. Like the expectations they have for the Messiah are formed not by the scriptures that they had, while they used to be, but actually now they're being formed by the culture and the things that they feel in that moment. So are our expectations for Jesus formed by that, or are they formed by the scriptures? Like really evaluate that. Like, does Jesus, like, because I think he'll surprise us a little bit, because he's not always going to fit into the box that we think he needs to fit into. Yeah, that's what I would say as we continue this journey to the cross with Jesus. What are the expectations you have for him as he gets closer and closer to the cross? What does that look like?
Man, that's awesome. Yeah, I think it's good for us to think about.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for listening today. We kind of jumped around a little bit.
Yeah, it was good.
I've enjoyed this conversation,
yeah.
And I hope you've enjoyed listening. And if this podcast has helped you find your greatest pleasure and purpose in Jesus, that's what we're trying to do here with this podcast. So if it's done that for you, then awesome. You should share it with a friend. Maybe it can be helpful in the same way for them.
Mm-hmm.
We love y'all so much. You're sent.